Welcome. I know we have people from all over the world, people in Brazil, outside Brazil, some customers, some of our major PSPs as customers. So welcome all of you as well. And in the meantime, let me introduce Julia Moreno Racine. She's our new head of public policy. Right, Julia? You started Bitso, if I'm not mistaken, 3 weeks ago. We're very happy to have you here, so welcome.
Thank you, Thales. Yes, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, so Julia, she's an expert in regulations in crypto and gaming. I always joke about that crypto and gaming are kind of twins, right? And the same process that gaming is going right now to have a legislation approved in Brazil. We do have one now approved for gaming as well. And we have Doutora Fernanda here. Hello, Doutora. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Hello, everybody. Good
Awesome. So thank
afternoon.
you.
Do you hear me? Well,
Yes, perfect. We have you here. So glad you're able to connect.
yes.
So I'm gonna do a brief introduction. So thank you, Fernanda, Dr. Fernanda. She is the responsible for the media and gaming practice at FAS Advogados in cooperation with CMS. She has more than 15 years of experience in the corporate market with expertise in complex associational agreements, very focused in gaming and media. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you, Thales. Thank you, Bitso, for the invitation. For me, it is a pleasure to be here and talk a little bit about this exciting, new, and almost regulated market.
Yes, and coincidentally, yesterday, right? Like, I'm not say like agenda was published yesterday, right? With the next step. So the timing for this webcast is it's great. So before we start, right, I'd like just to give like a quick context. As all of you know, last year, right, almost how we call in Brazil in the extra time of the second half, this regulation was approved, was in December 2023. So the fixed odd regulation was finally approved in Brazil, and now we're waiting like for like the specifics of this regulation, right? And it's moving relatively fast. In the beginning, I was saying that I see a lot of similarities between the crypto market and the gaming industry in Brazil, but this industry is moving even faster than the crypto because our law was approved, if I'm not mistaken, in December 2022, and we don't have any rules yet, but we've seen this moving very fast, and I think this webcast, the time is perfect. So Brazil, don't need to say, is a very like exciting market for the industry. More than 100 million adults, right? There's several statistics about the marketing growth in Brazil, but I was looking one that's saying that Brazil, from August 2022 to August 2023, the market by Data Hub, they say that we grew 135% in the sector. So this is a massive growth, and we can even see like the market growing even more now that we have like a legislation and clear rules that's going to protect both the customers and the environment as a whole. So with no further ado, I'm going to start with you, Fernando, if you can give us just like a high level overview of this regulation. Then I have two questions for you, and then we can start like officially a presentation about the specifics. But just to summarize, if you can do like a 5-minute overview of this new regulation, please.
Yes, of course. Well, as you said, the things were almost quick for the past year, but I mean, gambling was always a part of Brazilian culture, and Brazilians like to gamble, but it raises like sensitive issues related to corruption and addictions. So we until now we have a law which we call the Misdemeanor Act, which is from 1941, and forbid games of chance, which are the ones that rely solely on luck. Such a law needed to be updated because it is conservative and focused on promoting good morals, and especially after the internet that allowed foreign companies to exploit the Brazilian market without the government being able to do anything about it, because since it was something, since the activities were exploited through internet, and of course in 1941 we didn't talk about internet, the government didn't have much to do about those companies that were already exploiting the Brazilian market. And well, but in 2018, the sports betting at first, but then just betting, because we had now online games, they were legalized in Brazil, but only the main concepts were included in the law that legalized sports betting, but not the details on how such activity could be exploited in Brazil. So this law needed to be regulated. Well, the time passed by without the regulation come effectively. And the government and all of us saw this market growing and growing, especially due to a big investment in advertising, and also because of peaks, we saw this market growing fast and fast. And finally, I would say after a year of negotiations between political parties and the stakeholders, finally, in December 2023, we had Law 14709 published. But this law also, it gave us like the main concepts, the main obligations related to the exploitation of betting in Brazil. But we still don't have the details on how such activities may be exploited here. So, and that's why the whole market is focused on every piece of new related to new acts that little by little is being published by the government. And as you said yesterday, we had this great news, which was the regulatory agenda that was enacted by the government. And now we do have a focus, we have a light to guide us through all the acts that we expect to be published until July. And this was great news, because it shows the commitment of the government with the publication of such acts.
Amazing, amazing. So I'm gonna dive in a few about the specifics of what was published yesterday. So for everyone that's hearing us, we're gonna leave at least 10, 15 minutes for questions. So please submit your questions as well. That the idea is that this session is gonna be super interactive. But just to wrap up this overview, if someone doesn't have the full context, one question for you. What are the key elements of these new regulations that international gambling companies should know and should be aware of?
This is an interesting question, Thales, and I would like to stress that we are going to enter a test phase with this regulation. And in the beginning, I would say that all elements of the regulation are important and should be observed by the companies, because they will be observed by the authorities. So new entrants and companies that already exploit the Brazilian market but will be the first to apply for the license will undergo strong scrutiny, and I believe will be oversaw very closely by the government, and especially when we talk about the betting market, which is still surrounded by prejudice by the society. So I think this market needs to show the society that it is clear, it is committed to observe the law. And so I would say that all elements are important right now. But if I were to summarize the most important elements of the regulation, I would say that there are three. First of all, I would say that is the government's responsibility and concern with the consumers. And this is shown through the advertisement policies, policies associated with consumer assistance, AML policies, responsible gaming, match fixing policies, and all of those. The second important element, I would say that is the government's interest in promoting business in Brazil. So, therefore, necessitating companies to be constituted under Brazilian regulation and observe all the taxation requirements. And the third important element that I would say here, it would be the importance of effective oversight and control. And this will be done by the government through 3 steps. First would be through advertising. Second, through financial control. And third, through cyber blocking mechanisms. So if I were to summarize the whole regulation into 3 important elements, I would say these 3 would be the ones.
Awesome. Very clear. So now we're gonna dive in the specifics of this agenda and of this law. So I'm gonna pass the mic here to Julia. Julia, come on stage and ask her questions to Doutora Fernanda as well.
Hi, Fernanda.
Hello, Julia.
I think you're gonna talk about it, but I think it's important for us to tell everybody that it's listening, which are the first steps that the companies need to do. I mean, we have the 3 main points of the law that you talked right now, but if I want to come here, what is the first thing that I have to do?
Julia, first of all, it is important to constitute a company under Brazilian legislation. And I would say you have to have a CNPJ. And I would say that companies that are already in this process, which is a time-consuming process, are a few steps ahead of others, because the first requirement that companies will have to comply with would be to have a company constituted here in Brazil. So this would be the very first step. And I don't know if you allowed me, and I don't know, Julia, if you're going to ask more specific questions, but I made a presentation, and I think it would be nice to
sure.
to put it here.
Yeah. Can you share a screen with us? Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to add that it's very important for everybody to know that the regulation that was forgotten in 2018 and now it's back. It's back mainly because of the taxation part. So that's the main focus of the government. They see a big market and they see a very big opportunity to increase revenue in Brazil. So that's why the first step, and that's why it's the first requirement, right, Fernanda, for them to open a legal company here in Brazil, like a legal entity.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. I don't know if you can see the presentation.
Yes.
Okay, great. So first of all, I think it is important to say again that the regulatory process is not yet complete, and there are, as we know, several legislative acts drafted by the Ministry of Finance, which is the regulator, that have not yet been published, but now we know that they have an agenda, and we can follow that, and that we will have a lot of acts published until July. But I mean, information we have now may change because of these new acts, these future acts. But those are the deadlines that are already established by Law 14790. What are those? 5 years would be the term of the license to be granted by the regulatory authorities. 30 days will be the time to pay the license after it is granted. 6 months to active operators to comply with the new rules, and at least 90 days for payment and financial service providers to adapt to the rules also, meaning that to stop offering their services to business without a license. Here, I think it is important to clarify something. Despite the fact that these deadlines are already established in law, they are not yet executable because they depend on the authorization process. And until now, we don't have an act, we don't have the legal act that will start the process of authorization, the process for companies to apply for the license. So until we have this process already in place, those deadlines the government don't have the means to enforce. They're not enforceable yet because the government don't have the means to enforce them. So we may say that now companies that are operating in Brazil without the license are legal, are it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And such deadlines, I would not say suspended. I would say that they are not in place yet. This is the regulatory agenda that we talked about, and the government divided the publication of the act in terms of priority. So as you can see in phase 1, which will land at the end of April, we will have the means of payment ordinance published, the betting system ordinance, and the so expected authorization ordinance. So until the end of April, we will probably have this authorization process started, which is something that we all have been waiting for, so anxious about.
Yes, and Fernanda, I think it's important to say that when these deadlines start to run, all the companies have to find a means of payment that are regulated already, right? The ones like Bitso and payments institutions that are already credited by the central bank, by the Ministry of Finance. So, I mean, the deadline is not starting yet, but when it does, it's important for you to have a financial institution that can support you during this process.
Yes, of course. As I said, in relation to the companies that already have been companies that already constituted under Brazilian legislation, there are a few steps ahead. Companies that already have the authorization of Brazil's central bank to operate, of course, they are very steps ahead of others because this is also a time-consuming process. So if you have a partnership with a company that has already this license, you will be like some steps ahead of the other companies, of course. Okay, let's move on. So as I said, the federal authorization process is still pending regulation, and as far as we know, the legal act that will introduce such process will provide as far as we know, a 90-day window for companies to apply for the authorization. And companies that do not apply for the authorization within this 90-day window will have to suspend their activities. But companies that do apply for the authorization in this 90-day window will have then the 6 months to comply with the new rules. So that is why we believe the deadlines will talk to each other, the 6 months and the 90-day deadline that I talked a few slides ago. So there will be this 90-day, I mean, as far as we know, it may be 60, I don't know, but for now, what we know is that will be a 90-day window for companies to apply for the license. And if they do, the government will compromise in giving them 6 months to comply with the new rules.
And it's first come, first serve, right, Fernanda? I think we need to have in mind that the Secretariat of Prices and Bets, that is the secretariat inside the Ministry of Finance who's taking care of it, he will check the license as far as they are coming. So if you already start to prepare, if you already have all the requirements that are necessary, you will probably receive your license first if you apply first, because they have they will
Yes,
be
a
checking as long as
priority
they are
order.
coming. Yes.
Yes, and of course, this window will have to relate to the other priority window that was opened by the government in November 2023, when they requested a letter of interest from companies that would be interested in operating in Brazil. And for those companies, the government granted a priority in the document analysis. So we will also have to wait and see how the government will I mean,
Organize the line.
we'll grant that priority with this new window of priority, right? We should. Once again, we will have to wait and see. Well, here are the minimum corporate requirements. And as we said, legal entities must be incorporated under Brazilian law and have their headquarters and administration in the country. And that's why we said that companies that already have a CNPJ are a few steps ahead. And because this is the first big requirement. After that, a Brazilian, and one thing relates to the other, a Brazilian must be a partner holding at least 20% of legal entities share capital. This is a subject that has been much debated recently because it is surrounded of doubts in relation to who can be the partner that holds this 20% share capital, if it is possible to be a person or if it needs to be a company. And we expect that to be clarified also through these new acts. Let me, I think it's important that I say something about these mandatory corporate policies, because this is also something that companies can anticipate themselves and be ready for the authorization process when it comes, which is to elaborate and have their policies already in place when the authorization process has started. This is another step that companies may take as of now in order to be prepared when the authorization process begins. It is something that can put you in an advanced position in relation to the other companies. So, I mean, we have already been assisting a lot of companies in drafting their policies to have it all ready when the authorization process starts. Well, in relation to payment transactions, and this is a very important topic for you, and only institution authorized by the Central Bank of Brazil may offer services for betting agents. There is this doubt related to this 90-day deadline for companies to stop offering their services to companies that don't have the license in Brazil. And now I think we will have some clarification in relation to this 90-day window, that because it must relate to that 90-day window that companies will have to apply for the license. So what we believe is that we will have a first 90-day window, then the 6 months, and then for companies that don't apply for the license within this first 90-day window, the payment institution or financial institution, then they should stop offering their services to those companies, because if they didn't apply for the license in this first 90-day window, they won't have the license to operate, at least in that first term of the law.
And Fernanda, this license that regulates the institutions inside the central bank are hard to get, right? I mean, we have a lot of specifications. it's time consuming, so it's not something that will happen inside this 90 day, right?
No, for certain not. We are very, that is why that companies that already have the central bank license they are advanced in relation to the others, because it is also a very time consuming process.
Fernanda, I have a question here. One of our customers, to make it more interactive, I know we have a Q&A in the end, but if you want to send your questions, please do. So we have Alfredo, he's from Spiri, Brazil, one of our customers. Thank you, Alfredo, for joining us. And he has a question about the price of the license. So he asked, do you believe that the current pricing is fair? Maybe take in consideration like other jurisdictions, whatever. And do you think it's reasonable for companies to go through this whole process, that's not easy, to offer their service in Brazil?
Well, in relation to the 30 million reais
Correct.
for the license, this was something that I know was very much debated between the stakeholders and the government. And I do believe that this amount is due to a lot of calculation, and it is a result of a series of negotiations between both parties. So, but I mean, we still don't know if this is the number that will be kept in the further act, because the law only states that it will be up to 30 million reais. So, I mean, there's still a space for the government to change this number. And in relation to the steps that companies will have to, I think yes, exactly, because this is a market that, as I said, is surrounded by negative impressions by society. So it should be regulated, and more than that, companies should be, in my belief, companies should be willing to comply with such regulations in order to prove to society that it is not the kind of market society think it is. And we are changing the market now. This is the time and this is the place. And in order to change it and create a virtuous environment, I believe that at least in this beginning, it is important to be surrounded by a lot of rules and I mean all sorts of means that will allow society to see the market differently. So yes, I think it is important to be regulated. Yes.
So, Doutora Fernanda, another question. Sorry to interrupt, Julia. We have Lara Hag. So thanks for joining us, Lara. She's asking, do you think there will be a mandatory authorized capital for obtaining a license, and in what amount? In your opinion, will be there a mandatory security deposit for obtaining a license?
I think that this is another subject that has been that the government is studying. Yes, we still don't. I cannot assure you that this will come up in the next legislative act, but I do believe that the government is studying the possibility to require some meanings so that companies can assure that they are able to pay the license and maintain their activities. Yes.
I mean, the law even states that you have to pay the license within 30 days of the...
Yeah, that's for sure. Yes.
Yes. So, but what we are saying here is that you can do a deposit and
yes,
wait for the official license to get out, right?
Yes, I don't know if that was what she was.
No, just
the
just
question
another
is more
question.
about the capital of the company, right? Once it's constituted. I guess
Yeah,
this was the
this for sure, this already
yes.
established in law that we will have in the future act a minimum amount, a number that should be the capital of the companies. Yes, we don't know yet what this number will be, but it will probably be in the authorization process act. That's for sure.
Thank you. So if you want to continue, I see that Alfredo asked another question and we can address shortly, but if you want to continue your presentation, Doutora, and then we're going to address this next question.
Well, okay. And now, as we know now, the next act that is going to be published is the Payment Transactions Act. And as far as we know, the act was drafted by the central bank together with the Ministry of Finance, which is good news. And we believe that some doubts that we had already here and other doubts would be clarified, such as the deadline, as I said, and other doubts that the market has in terms of payment means and institution, such as that only institutions authorized by the Central Bank of Brazil that may offer financial services that allow the bettor to place a bet or collect the prize. Maybe this further act will clarify if there may be other agents that are part of the ecosystem, but not necessarily authorized by the central bank, that will be able to offer their service as well. I believe this will be something that will be regulated in the future acts, and all other questions that we have. But I mean, this in terms of transmissions rights, I think this is something that it is interest, because it is a restriction that was established by law 14790, which is that operating agents as well as its subsidiaries and parent companies are prohibited from acquiring, licensing, or financing the acquisition of rights to sports events for transmission and retransmission. This was a very interesting restriction, because as we know, we will have some players that would like to act in both ends, in betting activity and transmission rights, but this is not possible anymore after the publication of the law. Well, state licenses and federal licenses, this is a very hot topic. And
yes, but Doutora, before you start on that, yes. Aldo Biagini has one question. He's asking the following. Can a foreign company that has a Brazilian partner owning 20% of the share of that foreign company fully own the Brazilian company, or the requirement to have a Brazilian partner owning 20% of the shares is specifically on the Brazilian entity?
Yes. What we know is that the intent behind this requirement, the requirement outlined in the regulation, is to ensure the presence of capital in Brazil. So we believe that the government will try to specify in further legislation that the Brazilian ownership must be direct and not through a foreign entity that is then jointly owned by a Brazilian entity or individual. So that we believe that the ownership will have to be direct, but for now the law does not specify that.
Awesome, thank you. And yes, let's go to this hot topic that's super interesting.
Yes, it is. It is super interesting. And why is that? Why it is so interesting? Because essentially now we are in a battle between the states amongst each other, and between the states and the federal government. And why is that? Because the inconsistency between certain states' regulation and the federal regulation affects all stakeholders and creates some kind of insecurity around the regulation itself. what happened was that law 14.7, I know, introduced the new restriction on the operation of state licenses that were not that differed from what was established in the preceding bill. And what was that? The new provision states that a single group of companies could hold only one state license, limiting the provision of the service to the boundaries of that state. However, some states started to advertise that their license would allow companies to provide services nationwide. And not only that, but with a cheaper license. This is the case of Rio de Janeiro, for example. I put over there a comparison of the license issued by the federal government and the license issued by the federal state. And of course, after companies hear this kind of advertisement from some states that their license would allow companies to offer their services nationwide, companies began to wonder if it was worth it waiting for the federal license or go ahead and obtain the state license. But what I can say about this issue is that what is being advertised by some states is completely against the law. The law specifically states that state license would only allow companies to offer their services in the boundaries of that state. And this is what makes sense, right? But what is happening now also is that some states are notifying companies, determining them to suspend their services because they don't have a state license to operate. But I mean, the states don't have grounds to do that, at least not now, because we still don't have a authorization process issued by the federal government. And what I believe is that this issue will end up in court. That's for sure. And we'll have to see what Supreme Court will have to say about that again, because this was already subject to a Supreme Court decision a few years ago, but I believe that it will end up in Supreme Court again. But it is interesting what's happening. And this is due to the delay in the authorization process by the federal government. And that is why I think the government has speeded up the process and publicized the regulatory agenda. Because while this don't happen, while we don't have the authorization process issued, there will be a lot of confusion and states trying to gain territory. That's what's happening now. I don't know if anyone has questions about this topic, but if not, I will go on.
Yeah, no questions yet, but this definitely is a hot topic. So I'm sure we're going to receive some questions through the presentation.
Okay. Well, advertising and anti-corruption rules. This is one of the most important topic, and this is going to be used by the government to control the services of companies that are aiming to operate in Brazil. And as you know, advertisements of brands and services of operators not authorized to operate in Brazil are prohibited. And this is something that is already in place, but once again, not enforceable because we still don't have the authorization process. And that is why we can still see advertising of betting companies that don't have the license yet. And advertisements must contain warnings and informative actions to discourage gambling and alert consumers of its harmful effects. Any claims of probability or of winning or possible winnings are prohibited. Advertisements presenting gambling as glamorous are also prohibited. and the target audience must be over 18 years old, and advertisement must contain age rating advisory. The National Advertising Self-Regulation Council, which is CONAR, has already issued their recommendation. And here it is very important that companies control what they're aiming in terms of advertising, especially if they are going to, they will use digital influencers, because they are today a very powerful mean to get to people, but I think we'll need some very strict control regarding the advertising by digital influencers, and this is something that companies must be very, very cautious about and have a very strict control over. What I can say also is that now we can already see some changes in advertising. The other day I was watching a football championship, and we can already see that the advertising of betting companies during these football matches already have warnings targeting the audience to 18 plus, and this is something good to know, and it shows that football teams are willing to comply with the rules as well. Bonuses. We know that this provision has displeased many betting operators who use bonuses as a form of incentive and advertising. And we believe that also a future regulation may provide more details regarding this restriction, but today it is forbidden. It is forbidden that betting operators provide advances and bonuses to bettors, even as part of promotion, advertising, or marketing. And in relation to taxation, the operators will be taxed at 12% on GGR. And in terms of the taxation on bettors, personal income tax is levied at the rate of 15%. In terms of taxation, as various clauses have been removed from the law by the president, we expect that the future regulation will provide more details, especially regarding the taxation of bettors. But this is going through an analysis, but we don't know until when it will be possible to have this analysis.
Yes, I think, Fernanda, just to add something here, when the government, the Congress discussed the law, again, will be only this topic, okay? So nothing besides what was vetoed by the government, which is the taxation of the prices below 2,000 reais, will be discussed. It's only this, okay? Yes. And since Fernanda, what Fernanda already told, it's good to reinforce that the Congress don't have a date yet to do it, but while it's still not discussed, every betting, even the prices below 2,000 reais, will be taxed at 12%. Okay, so let's keep in mind that this is the rule until the Congress decide to discuss it, and we don't have a date for it yet. And not the whole law will be discussed, just this specific part.
Yes, that's it. Perfect, Julia. And another thing that is important to note is that in addition to the 12% on GGR, the other taxes and contributions owned by legal entities such as Imposto de Renda, CSL, PIS, COFINS are also levied on the revenue resulting from the operator's activity. So it is not only the 12% on GGR.
And
good
Fernanda,
point.
Yes, about this topic, we have a question from Luis, which he's asking, operators be responsible to collect this 15% tax?
Yes, probably. We believe that it will work as lotteries, as the same system as lotteries, in which the better will receive the prize already without the tax, without the taxation amount. That is what we believe will happen.
And the other one is still about this topic is, do you think, from Ricardo, do you think tax could vary from state to state?
Do you think that what could vary from state to state?
The tax.
Yes, there are specific taxes that are levied on the revenue from state, like ICMS. ICMS is not the case,
Yes,
but
but
yes, yeah. Oh, yes.
But I think he's asking about this 12% and this 15% that we are showing here. If
No,
this
12% and
percentage,
15% are something that is the competence of the federal government to establish. So this won't differ from state to state.
the only taxation that would change from state to state is if you want the local regulation, not the federal one.
Yes, and
Right?
of course, the specific taxes that which are yes, and which you have to pay to each municipality. But the 12% won't change from state to state if you have the federal license. Okay, let's move on. Consumer rights, as I said, this is a very big concern of the government, which is to protect the consumers. And I think there is something that is also important to point out, which is that companies currently operating in the Brazilian market may not be familiar with our legal system. And however, one issue of concern is the potential increase of legal costs and financial liabilities as a result of lawsuits that may be filed by bettors. That bettors will be much more easier for bettors to file suits against the companies, and companies should be aware of that because there will be a probable increase of costs in relation to this specific matters, this specific matter. And once again, there are steps that may and should be implemented by companies in order to try to diminish this risk, or at least try to be in a better position if a lawsuit is to come, right? So there are some measures that companies should also be, as of now, aware and implement in order to prevent lawsuits, or at least be put in a better position if such lawsuits are filed against them. But this is a concern that must be in the heads of the CEOs and in the companies. That's for sure. That was it. This is my team, and it was great. I hope that this presentation has given us some more clarification in terms of the regulation, and I am open for more questions if you have them.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Fernanda. We do have more questions. And we have one question here. Let me just share my desktop here as well. So one question we do have is from Alfredo Luz. He's from Speedy. Thank you again, Alfredo. He's asking, when you mentioned that only institutions authorized by the central bank can provide payment service to the betting industry, are you referring specifically to institutions regulated by IP, or does this include any other company with certain parameters, like arranjo de pagamento, por exemplo?
Yes, I am talking about the law is specific in establishing that only companies that are authorized by the central bank, which is the authorization per se, which is the license issued by central bank, are allowed to offer their services to betting operators. This is what is in the law today.
Perfect. Awesome. So I don't know if you have any other questions, but I would like to thank you all for participating. As you know, Bitso, right? Bitso started back in the day as an exchange. We're like celebrate our 10 years now. We have 7 licenses in different in jurisdiction, and we also have Bitso Business. What's Bitso Business? Is infrastructure to allow cross-border payments. So we have PSPs as customers that they provide service to operators. We have also some operators as customers, but the idea is we make settlement very easy. And our specialty is crypto, as you know. Of course, with this new regulation, we have to see how the frame is gonna be. But my last question, maybe a hot topic one, how you see crypto in this environment, right? Because in some countries we know that 25% of some bettings is going crypto, is growing, but how you see this being tackled by the Brazilian government?
What I believe is that the Ministry of Finance will wait for further regulation to be issued by the central bank. I don't believe this will be something that will be independently held by the Ministry of Finance right now. I don't think this would be the moment. And I think it will wait for regulation of the central bank itself. But this is what I believe. I don't know if Julia agrees with me.
Yes, I think they will do that mainly because, well, we don't have 2 different regulations by the end of the day. But all these topics are being discussed already in the central bank. So they will issue some regulations about crypto very, very soon that we are expecting. And we are being like, we are seeing everything that is happening really close to guarantee that there's no obstacles inside the business to operate in crypto.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. And another question, I think this one I can answer from Alfred as well. If a company works through Bitso, for example, as aggregator, is the company able to offer the service? Yes, we can discuss this. Again, our main play here is infrastructure for payment for cross-border. So if you have the relationships with our customers, we have all the infrastructure to enable this. So the answer is yes. Another question. Could you confirm how many days for a company to process transaction on an IP institutional after obtaining its license?
This one, I don't know if I know for sure, so I prefer not, madam. I'm going to pass that.
All right, let's pass. And one more
I'm
from
sorry.
Luis. No problem. He's asked about the GGR calculation usually include bonuses, but bonuses are prohibited. Can you expand a little, please?
Yes, I mean, if they are forbidden, they should be not part of the calculation of the GGR because it will not be an element from this calculation. I mean, again, we will have to see if there is going to be some details in relation to bonuses. But as for now, since it is prohibited, they shouldn't be part of this calculation of the GGR.
Okay. I think we like exactly 1 hour. I think we could keep talking for longer, but just want to thank you everyone that participated. Thank you so much, Doutora Fernanda, Julia as well. And we're here to help with any questions you might have about the regulation. And also if you want to know more about Bitso or service, not only in Brazil, but we also have in Mexico, Argentina, Colombia. We're here to help as well. Rafa Lima and I and all the team. Thank you so much and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me and, of course, myself and my team at Faz Advogados. We are completely at disposal for answering questions or whatever you may need. We are here to help.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And we're going to share the recording very soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.